An introduction, as Abdul Basit sir has responded. She is the OSD to NEP, but still some of the participants, if they are not aware, for them I am just introducing her. Ma'am is the former OSD, officer on special duty, OSD, National Education Policy 2020. At that time, ma'am was in Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education, Government of India. She has also worked as Secretary Committee to draft National Education Policy, Government of India. She has also successfully worked as Honorary Advisor, Special Education Policies, Center for Public Policy Research, Kerala. She has also worked as Nodal Officer of Government of India's Scheme of National Mission on Teachers and Teaching, LEE programs, ARBIT programs, faculty induction programs are her brainchild. Actually, she has started these programs in our country. She has also worked as Joint Director Education in the Planning Commission of India. She is also involved, has been involved in the preparation of 11th and 12th plan of Government of India. She has published papers in very reputed journals of India and abroad. She has also presented papers in various seminars and conferences. As far as her academic qualifications are concerned, she is MA Political Science, gold medalist of MA, PhD in Education, and associated with University of Mumbai, IGNOU, for around 40 years. We are very fortunate that she has given us time to talk on NEP. I think the most appropriate person to talk on NEP is Ma'am Dr. Shakila T. Shamsu ma'am, because she has been working on it since 2014 and it's 2024 right now. Earlier she was busy in preparation of NEP. Now she is helping us in understanding and its implementation. So participant, with these words, I would like to invite ma'am to talk on NEP. Ma'am will talk today on governance and management of higher education as envisaged in NEP 2020. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us, for giving us time from your busy schedule. Ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Shakir, and good afternoon to all the participants. I have this normal pattern of inviting a few of you to share your thoughts on national education policy before I start discussing the topic or delivering my talk on academic leadership, governance, and management. So can I have the pleasure of 2 or 3 of you? It's about 3:37 now, till maybe 3:45. If a couple of you can share your thoughts on NEP, it can be anything. It can be implementation challenge, or it can be any aspect where you want to just share your experience. I would really like to hear that from participants for about 5 to 8 minutes before I talk about this topic that is there on hand today. So please unmute yourselves, introduce yourself in terms of your discipline and institutional affiliation, and please go ahead.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Myself, Dr. Deepika from GB Pant University of Agriculture and Technology, Pantnagar. I am working as an associate professor in the Department of Physics. Regarding the NEP concern, what we have understand that this education policy basically wants the student, when they will come out after the graduation, they should have some skills. That means they can earn something and they can establish at particular place if they have left the education in between, even though they are capable of earning.
Thank you for sharing that thought. Yeah. Anyone else? Please, I want faculty to respond on the National Education Policy 2020, and you can express anything, even if you feel critical about something. Please feel free. This is a session where we should be interacting and not have a monologue with only the resource person talking.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Myself, Shelim Masud from West Bengal. I am faculty of Darjeeling Government College under the University of North Bengal, ma'am. So whatever I know, ma'am, I feel that NEP 2020 was a very important and very good. But some I face some kind of problems, ma'am. In that rural area, actually, Darjeeling Government College belongs to some rural area.
Right.
So there is some problem. Means, ma'am, the students comes from a very village or rural area. So suppose I give an example, ma'am. Some students comes from commerce department to learn mathematics, but they don't have mathematics in high secondary level. So as a mathematics teacher, it's very much difficult to teach them. So I feel these kind of problems are uh, problematic to implement the NEP.
I will respond to that. I can easily relate to your area of concern, which is not really just yours, but a number of faculty who say the similar problem in other sessions also. And can I have one of the last participants before my talk and my interaction?
Yes,
Anyone
ma'am.
else? Yeah, Ji, please
Ma'am,
go
I'm
ahead. Yeah.
Mohammed Danish Muki from Uttarakhand. RLS Memorial Degree College affiliated to कुमाऊं यूनिवर्सिटी नैनीताल। बेटा हमारा भी मैम रूरल एरिया है, यहाँ भी प्रॉब्लम ये आती है कि जब हम मल्टी डिसिप्लिनरी की बात करते हैं तो मैम यहाँ जो आर्ट साइड वाले स्टूडेंट हैं वो कैपेबल ही नहीं है कि बेसिक कोई साइंस का कोर्स भी ऑप्ट कर ले तो फैकल्टी चेंज करने के लिए, या कॉमर्स से कोई स्टूडेंट है तो वो साइंस का कोई ऑप्ट कर ले। तो मैम यहाँ डिफिकल्टी बहुत है, तो हमें ऐसा करना पड़ रहा है कि हम उसी फैकल्टी से ही चारों सब्जेक्ट दे रहे हैं, 3 मेजर और एक माइनर भी हमें उसी फैकल्टी से देना पड़ रहा है। और मैम यहाँ इंडस्ट्री भी नहीं है कोई आसपास ऐसी कोई खास कि जहाँ हम MOU कर सके, साइन कर सकें, या बच्चों को इंटर्नशिप के लिए वोकेशनल कोर्स की ट्रेनिंग दे सकें। तो मैम यहाँ भी हमारे यहाँ ये दिक्कतें बहुत हैं।
Okay. Okay. So thank you. Three of you all have raised in and response to my request, and thank you for that. At the outset, let me also say Dr. Mohammed Shakir had showed you a document, and all of you responded saying, except one of you who said that it is NEP 2020, all of you said it is new education policy 20, instead of national education policy. So let me first try and tell you that I have been an OSD for new education policy. Why that nomenclature was used was you had an 86 policy that was there, and when that was getting changed into the exercise of making a new policy, we called it a new education policy. Now that the policy has been approved officially, it has to be referred to always as the National Education Policy 2020. So next time you have that document shown, and it is not the draft, it is the final version. Of course, he is not having a printed version of it. He has shown you a version which is a printout and which has been spiral bound, but that is the final National Education Policy 2020. It was approved on 29th of July, and we recently celebrated the 4th anniversary of the approval of the National Education Policy 2020. Having said that, what the concerns that have been raised about implementing multidisciplinary education in rural areas, I can completely understand with that either the students don't have the capability to take up subjects from various disciplines, and in subjects like mathematics, if they have not had the fundamentals known up to the class 12, it becomes difficult for them to take it. Now, both these need to be looked at. Of course, what the person from Agriculture University was putting forward understanding of NEP, where we are combining not just cognitive knowledge but also skills, so that employment is also a part of what they may be benefiting from taking up multidisciplinary. But the concerns that you raised about mathematics and about the situation in Uttarakhand, we must understand that we should be very clear before admissions into courses, and institutions unfortunately are not doing it. We must guide the students to take up courses. Once we opened it up and we said that students can take up any combination of courses, students sometimes erroneously take courses because they think, okay, mathematics is a subject which has value therefore that they can take up mathematics, but not realizing that if they don't know the fundamentals, it is difficult for them to do it. But if they have already taken it, then the only solution that I can suggest is, there would be, let us say your class is of 60 students and there are 20 such students who do not have that, then we must work out how we can have tutorials and some sort of remedial coaching. I'm sorry to use the word remedial, but that seems to be the nomenclature normally used, where you try to address such students so that they are able to cope up with the fundamentals. The other strategy that you can do is, if there are 60 students and 20 of them do not know it, put student to student mentors, so that somebody who has a thorough knowledge of the fundamentals of mathematics is sort of mentoring another student who does not know the fundamentals of mathematics. So wherever pre-entry counseling was not done, then you address the problem by doing these techniques of student to student mentoring, teacher conducting tutorials and special remedial classes, and also try and put them into group activities so that you know that a certain minimum level of learning has been acquired so that they are able to take up. Now, coming to the Uttarakhand issue, that is even more serious, because there, since there are no students who are having the capability, and there is this assumption that we have, and which is not wrong in a certain sense, that science stands at the highest order in terms of art, science and commerce, then comes commerce, and then comes art, and there is a feeling that the least intelligent has come into arts, which is wrong actually, which is wrong, because there would be students who may be good at science, but they don't want to take up science and they're more keen to learn social sciences. But if they are really poor learners and their intellectual capability is not there to really understand subjects in commerce, and so you still, you will not make it multidisciplinary. If your college is having arts, science and commerce, it is not right to give them 4 subjects in arts and take up 1 minor again from the arts stream. We must be able to take up some low difficulty level of either commerce or either fundamental subject of maybe life sciences or environment or something of that kind, so that other than maybe sociology or history or economics or political science, they are taking up a non-social science subject, including maybe it could be majoring or minoring in languages also. But it has to be either in humanities or social sciences or sciences and commerce. Fundamentally, these are the 4 basic levels at which we should try the combination. Otherwise, such students will not be able to really become multidisciplinary. And I am not taking a session on multidisciplinary education, but the need of being multidisciplinary graduates is not something that is fanciful. It is something that is imperative and mandatory, because today the job market or the economy looks for commonly a T-shaped graduate. When I say a T-shaped graduate, all of us sitting here are I-shaped graduates, where we only have core disciplinary depth. Like what Shakir was saying, my master's is in political science. And at that time, it is enough. Most of you, when you introduce your discipline. But today, along with political science, a student must know a little bit of commerce or sciences, and along with that, skills and language and value-added courses and common courses. So the need for multidisciplinarity is the requirement of becoming a T-shaped graduate with breadth of various disciplines along with depth. And our times, only depth was there, and that was okay because silo-based degrees paid off. Whereas today, a silo-based degree only in arts, only in science, only in commerce is not likely to help that student to be able to become a productive individual. Maybe he or she may get a job for 2 or 3 years, but thanks to all the technological changes, job profiles change, and then that student will not have anything to fall back upon, because that redundancy of a certain discipline might not really hold that person in good stead to have about 40 years of a productive life. Assumption is that he or she is about 21, 22 and go on to work till about 60 or 65. that 40 years should be one in which that student should be gainfully employed. And the scenarios are changing so much that they would require to have not just arts or science or commerce or engineering or any of these disciplines by itself, but a combination of disciplines. And that is why we say multidisciplinarity is an imperative requirement today and not an option. And we have moved towards that direction from structured silo-based degrees to flexible, integrated, multidisciplinary degrees only because of this evolving and futuristic requirements of graduates, so that their employability quotient goes up and they are becoming contributing individuals, and they contribute to their own individual growth and to the societal growth and economic growth and national development. So I would urge the Uttarakhand person to sort of look at a possibility that if there are students who are coming even from an arts background, you are given this option even to offer it in the regional languages. So you need not insist on English medium. You can think in terms of offering it even in any other local languages, including Hindi, and allow them to take up fundamental subjects, which can be in commerce or which can be in science or which can be in environment or which can be in language. So if right now this has gone ahead, go ahead with that. But for the next batch, we should try and see if this is possible. So thank you all for having interacted with me in the initial stage. And the topic that we are discussing today is academic leadership, governance, and management, which brings me to making you all aware. What I'm trying to do is I'm covering this topic from the point of you all understanding what are the challenges in Indian higher education system and what is it that the NEP has recommended in terms of addressing those challenges from the perspectives of leadership, governance, and management, which is in certain sense even touching upon the regulatory system. Now, India's higher education system, all of us here are aware, is one of the largest in the world in terms of having about 1,200 universities, some 47,000 affiliated colleges, and something between 13 to 14,000 standalone institutions. We have something, as per the All India survey data, something like 44 million students, and we have something about 1.6 million faculty in higher education. This is massive size. Education as a subject, as far as the Constitution of India is concerned, is a subject in the concurrent list. And therefore, while the union government may bring out policies, state governments will have to bring out regulations to implement those policies, because it is no one size fits all. So the UGC may bring out guidelines, but each state government may have to bring its own regulations for implementing various aspects. But that largely happens with regard to the academic programs, with regard to the academic bank of credit and research and innovation and many other aspects. But as far as the context of our theme today, the size of the higher education in our country not only seems to be something that we are proud of, but on the other side, on the flip side, it is also becoming a very challenging aspect. And why do we say that? Because one, as I said, as a federal setup, it requires a coordinated approach between the center and the states. And states are at different levels of preparedness. And as far as higher education is concerned, it is really not something that is directly within the control of the state governments, because higher education institutions are largely autonomous institutions. But the complexity comes because of the character of the higher education institutions. So how have we categorized higher education institutions in our country? We have said that some of them are funded by the government of India, which is central universities like AMU, Jamia, Delhi University, JNU. They are all funded directly by the government of India. Of course, the funds going from the ministry through the UGC and then passing on. IITs, NITs, ICERs, triple ITs, These are all institutions which are directly getting funds from the government of India. As opposed to that, you have universities which come under the state governments, and they are a large number. Actually, the centrally funded institutions just form about 150 odd numbers, whereas out of that 1,200 universities, the bulk of them are there in the state sector. And even in terms of the enrollment, when I say that there are about 44 million students in higher education, more than 40 million students, that is around 94% of higher education enrollment is in the state universities, not in the centrally funded universities, which have a limited enrollment. So the mismatch is that the funding is very huge and the number of students it is catering to is very, very limited. Here, the state universities have limited funding. There is a resource crunch, and the largest enrollment of students are there. That itself, as a contradiction, results in poor quality of education among students who are largely there in the state university. That comes out because there is lack of infrastructure, there may be faculty shortages, the technical ICT resources may not be there, the teaching learning resources in terms of libraries and laboratories may be missing, and so on. Now, these two form the major chunk. Now, within that, you also have deemed universities, and then you also have private universities. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the complexity of our higher education is something that has impacted the quality of higher education. And it has also impacted effective governance. Governance of such institutions which are very complex by nature, because those which are centrally funded have a pan-India jurisdiction. State universities have only state jurisdiction, but funding is low. The deemed universities enjoy another status, and therefore the governance mechanism in that also changes. So also the private universities which have been set up, not all of them have been able to look at education as a public good. Some of them tend to be very commercializing education and looking at a profit motive. And we, in the policy, we have not really condemned the private sector, because we cannot ignore the fact that the private sector is functioning in education, right from preschool education up to higher education, technical education, and professional education. But the complexity of higher education arises because of the manner in which our higher education system is organized. That is one of the challenges. And I'll tell you how we have tried to solve that in the NEP, though it may not directly relate to the topic on hand, but it gives you a larger picture. The second is the functionality of higher education. We are talking largely about higher education as teaching, which is knowledge dissemination, research, which is knowledge generation and knowledge production, and community engagement or social engagement or extension, as we call it. Now, what is happening is between teaching and research, undergraduate education in our country has put a lopsided overemphasis only on teaching without weaving in research within it. So the gap between teaching and research at undergraduate education has largely resulted in Indian institutions not featuring in the global rankings. So the need to address this gap and look at teaching and research as complementary and two sides of the same coin, and the need to nurture research at undergraduate education is something that is very, very essential and which this policy has recommended. The third is the gap between entrepreneurship or skills and teaching. So as the Deepika from Agriculture University mentioned, that this policy is trying to give emphasis on skills education. The reason why it is important to weave in skilling as part of the education mainstream arises because in the 21st century, when we look at learning, learning is not just the learning of cognitive knowledge. Learning is also the skills, the experiential, the problem solving, and the practical, the application of theory to real life situations. So to weave in skills along with education and to give employability skills to our students, like in our common courses, which are problem solving skills, analytical skills, collaborative skills, communication skills, scientific temper. These are all part of the requirement to have skill sets and competencies with the qualifications, which can be logistics management, supply chain management, which is all required today in the services sector, the MSME sector, the hospitality sector, the travel sector, health sector, agribusiness sector, the digital world. All these skills are needed because these are where the jobs are. If you have heard the Honorable Finance Minister's budget speech, the government is seized of the fact that there is a crisis of employment, and that employment is not necessarily coming only by doing a full-fledged degree. It requires children to have the right kind of skills, and that is why a boost has been given to the MSME sector, so that more jobs are created through the micro, medium, small enterprises. And that thrust has to be weaved into education, because education is the feeder which provides students with these kind of skills. So teaching, skills and research along with entrepreneurship, and therefore the need to focus on job creators and setting up enterprises through startups and incubation. So this was missing, and this has been a challenge which we are addressing. We are talking of industry academia interfaces. We are talking of many ways of collaboration between the industry and higher education institutions and the research laboratories to address that gap. The next challenge comes because NEP has talked about 5 goals of access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. These 5 goals are not mutually contradictory. They are supposed to be mutually sort of complementing each other and not one to the exclusion of other. So when you enhance access, you cannot reduce quality, or when you address social disparities, you cannot reduce quality. So in all these, and you look at inclusion, you have to address the issue of affordability. So the 5 goals. So when talking about equity and inclusion, we are conscious that even though we may talk about India's gross enrollment ratio being 28.1 today as per the All India Survey data, the latest one, we are looking as per the policy to reach about 50% by 2035. And when you say it has to reach 50% in absolute numbers, it has to translate from 44 million students to nearly about 80 million students. Now, when you do this exponential growth in higher education, you must be conscious about the regional disparities and the social disparities. The SCs, the STs, the OBCs, the minorities, women, transgenders, those who are economically poor, those who are living in geographically inaccessible areas, the urban poor, all these vulnerable sections. Because as a part of sustainable development, it is important that all sections of the society have equal opportunities to participate in both school and higher education. And the massification of higher education that we are talking about cannot be a massification of higher education of a general population to the utter disregard of those socially and economically disadvantaged groups who are otherwise not having enough participation rate in both school education and in higher education. So the next challenge that we are talking at is by looking at the aspects of equity and inclusion, and these cross sections of the society, along with children who come in with, let us say, disabilities. It is no longer being used as a term. They are referred to as differently abled. So it's not just the blind, the deaf and dumb, and the physically handicapped, but children who are having learning disabilities also, in terms of dyslexia or bipolar disorders or autism and multiple sclerosis. All these sets of students have to be brought into the mainstream. And that challenge also is looming before us, because we have been sort of committed to the idea that we should provide education for all. Now, the rural-urban divide, the divide between, let us say, social groups, these are all areas which require focused interventions. And the policy in its sense has tried to create special education zones, gender inclusion fund, social inclusion fund, has talked about providing for higher education in regional languages as a game changer. It has also talked about providing basic facilities, including enhanced free ships and scholarships. The next challenge that we are looking at in higher education is the quality of teaching and the quality of faculty. For someone who's been a teacher and an academician, joining and working within the government, let me be very frank to tell you that the bureaucracy looks at the poor quality of teaching with only one person to blame for it, and that is the faculty. Their assumption is that we as faculty are not really having good skills of teaching, and therefore learning outcomes of higher education students are not as desired, resulting in the industry and the corporate sector saying that our graduates are unemployable. Not that they are not unemployed, but they are unemployable. They do not have the employability quotient. So the person they're willing to hang by the noose and crucify is the faculty, without understanding that certain basic amenities that faculty would require have to be put in place, which is what again this policy has tried to say by looking at the criticality of the teacher, their continuous professional development, training, lifelong learning, and training them for leadership development positions is the other aspect of it. Then, as I mentioned, funding remains an issue. And another recent development that we are looking at as a challenge is that world over, the idea of cross-border higher education and global mobility of students and faculty and institutions are becoming a reality. And therefore, internationalization of higher education is one of the areas which is a challenge. And many ways we have tried to address that. Now, I have just not given you all the challenges, but some of the major challenges that you look at in higher education includes one more, and that is where we are talking about a very fragmented higher education system, which is silo based. So you have degrees given out in arts, science, commerce, engineering, pharmacy, which is a fragmentation of higher education, and which we have tried to address by talking about multidisciplinarity. So taking cognizance of these challenges, when we wrote the recommendations for higher education, we tried many ways to address fragmentation by looking at holistic integrated education, looking at teaching and research coming together through multidisciplinary education, research and innovation coming together, skills and teaching and entrepreneurship being brought in, research and innovation being given a major thrust, and a whole lot of reforms that are also focusing on who manages the higher education, which is what we are trying to understand here. So the idea that higher education institutions can contribute effectively, whether it is in terms of teaching and therefore good graduates and postgraduates and PhDs who come out, whether it is in terms of research for further research and higher order contributions, scientific contributions, patents, publications, and so on, that part of it, and even for social engagement and the community well-being, because that is where the relationship between higher education and society comes in. So we have tried as far as possible to look at all these recommendations, but for the theme that we have today, we are saying that those who manage higher education, the leaders, the academic leaders, and the governance systems, and the external regulation have to have a lot of reforms and changes. So when you talk about academic leadership, it is important to understand that higher education institutions desirably must be headed by faculty who mature and promote themselves to reach leadership positions. We do not promote the idea in the policy that it is a bureaucracy or it is a corporate sector who will head higher education institutions. It should be leaders who come from the academic fraternity who then take on leadership positions. But even though that trend is there to a very large extent, what is basically seeming as missing is the lack of leadership skills in faculty who go on to become vice chancellors and directors and deans and HODs. And therefore, when you look at academic leadership, what are those qualities that go to make up a good academic leader? We are talking about largely 10 qualities that we are looking at in an academic leader. That an academic leader who is heading our institution or who is there as a pro-vice chancellor or a director or a dean or an HOD, these are all leadership positions. They should be able to have visioning and strategizing. A leader, I may be a professor of botany and I may have been teaching for last 20-25 years, but the moment I go on to become a leader of an institution or heading an institution, there are certain qualities that I must be able to work upon and empower myself so that I become an effective academic leader. Educational administration calls for a different set of skills other than your disciplinary knowledge. And that is one of it is visioning and strategizing, which means that you will set a vision and a goal for your institution and you will work out a strategic plan of action, how to achieve that goal with timelines and with certain targets that you have, where you have certain performance indicators to reach that. Second is people management skills. Looking at higher education institutions deal with a complex set of people within it. They have teachers, they have people who are dealing with administration, the student fraternity is there, the parental community is there, and they have a lot of technical staff, which are sometimes pure technical staff, some are administrative technical staff, some may be computer related staff. So a variety of people who are there, and these have to be managed in an effective manner. So how to manage people? How do you communicate with them? How do you resolve the problems that they have? So along with people management comes conflict resolution, because any people management where there is a lot of grievances and there can be a lot of anger and frustration, whether it is student fraternity, teacher fraternity, non-teaching staff, the core ancillary staff who may be there running buses or hostels or any other facility, all of them need to have a communication channel which is not decided in an ad hoc manner, but that channel of communication should be a regular ongoing one, and that would help to prevent any kind of escalation of conflict, and therefore conflict resolution mechanisms and the leader having the skills to handle conflicts, that becomes very important. Next comes decision making. The person who is holding leadership position must be able to take appropriate decisions within the right time so that goals are achieved. It can be short-term goals, it can be long-term goals, it can be academic goals, it can be other goals that you have set for yourself, but decision making has to be done. You cannot stall decisions, you cannot sit undecided over something that is an issue over there, or you have to look at that strategic plan of action and say, this is the decision I need to take. So let us say, for example, for equity, that our enrollment is about 2,000 in the university, and in keeping with NEP, I should enhance my enrollment. But I want to decide how I will ensure that SCs, STs, OBCs, girls are all represented. So I take a decision that this is the mechanism. I give scholarships or I give free ships, and decisions have to be taken at that time. Whether it is for conducting an examination, whether it is the running of an academic program, for all these, you need to have decision making as a skill. Then comes the other aspect of the core function of a higher education institution, which is teaching and research. The leader must always be conscious that my HEI must provide good quality education and also provide good quality research. So that thrust, what all is required, faculty positions, if they are vacant, looking at those, looking at lack of teaching resources, looking at lack of libraries or laboratories, looking at lack of computer facilities, All these must be assessed, and all necessary inputs for effective teaching must be there in place, as much as for research and for innovation. Now, that is the critical part on which the performance of an institution and its rankings in terms of accreditation, in terms of ranking, Indian rankings through NIRF or the global rankings, must be a continuous ongoing effort to keep enhancing the levels of it. The next important aspect is to look at the two major stakeholders in HEI. One is the students and the other is the teachers. When it comes to the students, all necessary requirements for student support and learner support services needs to be there in place, along with grievance mechanisms for handling their concerns, which means that we must have a non-discriminatory policy. And if there are cells that have to be created, like anti-ragging cells, the cells for prevention of sexual harassment of girls, or cells for the protection of SCs and STs, for all this, the kind of organizational requirements that UGC mandates, and not just create a cell and put it there for the name of putting it there, but ensuring that they look at issues that deals with student. In terms of also the learner support, what kind of facilities and what kind of amenities that needs to be provided to students so that they are able to effectively take benefit of the academic programs that they have enrolled must also be taken care of. So on the point of view of this, we should also be conscious about student diversity, inclusion, and student support services needed for academics. The same way for the teachers, those in leadership positions must look at the issues relating to faculty, their continuous professional development. Firstly, ensure that faculty positions are there in place. If an institution has 250 faculty positions and only 100 of them are there in position, that university is not likely to, or that college or any institution will not be able to perform. And that adds as a burden on the other faculty, and that results in finally very poor learning outcomes. Therefore, issues relate to not only the recruitment, ensuring their service conditions, ensuring basic amenities, and ensuring their career growth through a very systematized method, which of course UGC gives us the regulations, but how we do that on a regular basis and ensure that these are sort of maintained in a very standard manner and in a fair, transparent manner becomes very important to ensure that performance appraisal and career growth goes in a very systematized, scientific, rational, and a very orderly manner without looking at individual faces, and that it is a very balanced and a rational way in which there is no unfairness in that, there is no discrimination in that takes place. Equally important is the professional development of teachers, and for that continuous training, instead of saying no, I can't relieve my faculty, I can't send them for training, it is important that faculties keep enhancing their skills, and therefore orientation programs, refresher programs, leadership development programs, these which are conducted, the participants should be allowed to take part in them, including seminars and conferences at national and international levels and workshops, because that is where the professional development and capacity building of teachers take place. Now, as a leader, you are also very much required to have administrative skills and financial management. Now, you may have been, as I said, a professor for so many years, but moment you come into leadership positions and you having to take decisions, you must know all the rules and regulations that need to be followed. These are there in various handbooks and manuals. You may have your registrar, you may have a finance officer who may be there, you may have staff dealing with those departments, but a leader must also be aware of and cannot take the claim that no, I am there as an academic head and I need not know about all these other aspects. If the leader is not aware of it, he or she is most likely to be taken for a ride, and certain decisions may sometimes be wrongly taken because the leader is the one who has to be conscious and aware of all the minor nitty-gritties. He is not putting up the note. Maybe it is put up by a dealing assistant and it goes up from an SO to an AR and goes up. but finally that file that comes to the leader, the person must be seized of all the pros and cons while taking that final decision on that particular note. And therefore, the awareness of administrative rules and regulations, awareness of financial rules and regulations becomes important. The last aspect that the leader must be focusing on is on focusing on collaboration. So the word today is that individuals need to collaborate. At our times, we did not have this as a requirement. Collaboration is critical to individual, institutional, national survival today. And therefore, when we talk about multidisciplinarity, it is institutional collaboration. When we talk about multidisciplinarity, it is also departmental collaboration. So collaborative skills, including international collaboration, is now becoming very critical. International collaborations through joint degrees, dual degrees, twinning programs, research, collaborative research, these are all becoming a reality to be acquired as a leadership quality by those who are leading up to leadership positions. Now, in this framework, the policy clearly says that leadership must be nurtured even in very young faculty. So under the same scheme, which you all are having the Malviya Mission Training Program, you are having 3 levels of leadership programs, and you should have a look at the website to go through which are available at the moment. And there are institutions which have been identified, so that just like you are participating in NEP orientation and sensitization, assistant professors have early leadership development program. Associate level, there is mid-level training, and for senior level at the level of deans and HODs, and so there are other kinds of training programs. So leadership is to be done at all levels. So you need not start feeling, look, I am only an assistant professor, I only have 5 years of experience, and I am not in the picture of leadership development. No, leadership is nurtured over a period of time, and as an early entrant or an early faculty also, there is need to have leadership development. So this leadership package that we are talking about is to be nurtured so that all faculty are at their appropriate stages of development in their career, along with their own academic development, are also developing the administrative or the academic leadership skills, so that tomorrow when they go on to take up decisions, let us say, for example, why should an early faculty undertake leadership development? We are talking about projects and project funding. How you deal with a project requires you to know how many people you should have as your co-PIs, how many people should be there to assist you, what is your manpower requirement, what would be the funding, how much time it would take. These kind of things are part of early leadership that you should know, so that you are able to be part of projects that can help you to also get your own career growth and also help the institution in terms of getting project funding. Now, that is one part of what we talk about in this theme. The next is the governance part of it. So there are 2 aspects. When you talk about governance, it is internal governance of an HEI. And when you talk about regulation, it is the external part of it. So governance and management in our national education policy is looking at, I would say, the bodies that deal with governance. Now, when you say good governance, what does it mean? It means it is a fair, transparent system. You have good standard operating practices and protocols in place. You have rules and regulations. You have bodies that take collegiate decisions and so on. So having all this in place is not adequate unless it is done in a very regular manner. That is, meetings are held regularly, meetings are conducted in a very democratic manner. You are saying that the body that is conducting the meeting is a representative body. So all aspects of good administration and good governance requires putting in place a very systematized, technologically driven, because today we use technology for all this, for management information systems, for enterprise resource planning, And the bodies that are there, like academic councils, the finance committee, the executive bodies, which are called the Senate in some places, the board of management, the executive council, the court, these are all bodies that are representing the governing life of an institution. And these bodies have multiple stakeholders who are there representing the teaching fraternity, the administrative fraternity, the student body, and so on. We have said in this policy that though our higher education institutions, if they are state governed, they have a different governance structure. If they are funded by the government of India, their governance structure is different. If they are a private university, their governance structure is different. If it's a deemed university, these are all laid down in the statutes and acts and rules of that university. And within this entire framework, while this has all been in place, we have still found that higher education institutions are not well managed organizations. That is where we have tried to say certain principles. One is that higher education institutions are no doubt autonomous bodies, and the degrees of autonomy vary from affiliated colleges directly under the control of a university to a college which has become autonomous and therefore is having or enjoying a certain degree of administrative, academic, and financial autonomy. It also becomes very important then when saying that we are autonomous, that we are equally accountable in terms of the action. So the balance between autonomy and accountability is always a conflict, because on one side, representatives of regulators like the UGC or the AICT, or like Deepika has the Agriculture Council of India, or the Ministry of Education if it's a centrally funded, the balance between the two, between autonomy and accountability, is always a tightrope to walk, because decisions will sometimes be overridden by those taken at an autonomous level because of that external interference, or the external, I may not say interference, but that external body which is trying to ensure the accountability part of it. So the thin line that needs to be drawn is to ensure that you have certain laid down standard norms and decision making rules and regulations. So balancing autonomy and accountability, we have thought is the best thing to do is to have a very democratic system within an HEI in terms of having collegiate decision making, that it is not a centralized decision taken at a top level without taking into account the stakeholders' voices. And that is why collegiate decision making is a body of people who are taking in. And this body of people that we are talking about is not a body of people with only the senior management. We are talking about all stakeholders being represented: parent representatives, teacher representatives, student representatives, civil society, retired academicians, retired scientists and educationists, those who are a part of, let us say, the local community, in the sense of the local body representatives, then those who are part of maybe industry, many other areas which are stakeholders. So when you talk about internships, you must have industry representatives. When you talk about skill enhancement, you must have people from those skill-based industries. So it has to be a representative group. And all these people are collectively taking decisions regarding that institution. And we've set forward a body which we call the Empowered Board of Governors. Now, this we have left to the institutions. Either you do away with your executive council or your BOM or your Senate, whatever you have, and replace that with the Empowered Board of Governors. Or if you don't want to do that, but you want to have the EBOG above it as the Empowered Board of Governors, then let it be a body that is newly created. Here is where, as I said, we have not really made it a prescriptive policy. We have made it merely recommendatory. And what suits a higher education institution may be the best way to look at reconfiguring their governing bodies in this manner. But we definitely said that it has to be, all bodies have to be functioning in a fair and a transparent manner, and all these should be available for let us say examination in the public domain in a limited manner. Whoever with a username and password should be able to access the minutes of the meetings that have happened, the records that are maintained, so that you are conscious about what decisions have been taken and who have been those people who have taken. And all these bodies must use technology so that there is a well established system of, let us say, disclosure. Now, as far as disclosure is concerned, currently we have a system which is more like an inspector Raj. So in accreditation, you have a NAC team which comes in. For NIRF, of course, it is self-declaration. Then there is a whole lot of data that is being asked for All India survey and so on. Now, all we have said that let us have a kind of a MIS system where one data is across for all these purposes. One for maybe data for survey, one for NAC accreditation, one for NIRF. The same data should be able to retrieve, and that is where a ERP system has to be put in place. And we have also said that the system of inspection should go away and probity should be maintained through disclosure. Disclosure that is there on the websites of the universities, and if it is through intranet, not necessarily for public, but within the institution, the intranet should have a platform which allows all the stakeholders within that institution to have access to that data. So giving away the purpose of inspection, which has its own negative fallouts, which I don't have to explicitly state, but all of us are aware, we would like to go for a disclosure system which ensures probity and which ensures that we continue to offer education as a public good. So when saying this, let me be clear about it. As far as India is concerned, education remains a not-for-profit activity, and it is something which is seen as a public good. And though the private sector has a role in it, they cannot commercialize education. So in the policy, we've been very explicit that if institutions are charging exorbitant fees, are following unfair means, and there is a high degree of, let us say, inbreeding within the same family, we do not encourage that, and action could be taken again. So even in private institutions, only qualified people, it may be a family which has provided the funding, they must have been the ones who are the developers of that institution, but they will not be the ones who will have the vice chancellor position. They should be people who fulfill all the academic requirements. And if any institution is commercializing education, in the sense that the profits that they make or the revenue that they generate, it should not be diversified for non-educational activities. It should be used for the development of their own institution, to provide better infrastructure, to provide better teaching learning resources, and to ensure that faculty are paid well, that research is encouraged, and all those aspects which contribute to the educational development of that institution. Now, for doing all this, we have also talked about an instrumentality which we called as the institutional development plan. So what is an IDP? And if you are all in your own host institutions, you should get back to know whether your college or your university is preparing an IDP. And why we put that, it is because it streamlines governance and it helps that leader in that first quality I told you of visioning and strategizing. So in the NEP, we talked about recategorizing or recalibrating higher education institutions as teaching intensive universities, research intensive universities, multidisciplinary education and research universities. And for affiliation, we said that from an affiliating system in a period of 15 to 20 years, we will move towards degree granting autonomous colleges. So I am not trying to tell you that 47,000 colleges by 2040 will be 47,000 degree granting colleges. This needs to be configured. Some of them are already colleges with potential for excellence. They can become teaching intensive universities. Some colleges can come together to form a cluster universities, with only one caveat or one exception, that wherever an affiliated college is catering to the equity needs, and therefore it is located in a hilly area or a geographically inaccessible area, like two of our people here in Darjeeling and Uttarakhand and so on, they may continue to go on with a system of affiliation. But largely we expect that this changes will happen, and when affiliating institutions go on to become graded, to become autonomous, it is done in a graded manner over a period of time through mentorship, hand holding, and ensuring that benchmarks and standards are achieved, so that gradually they acquire all the quality assurance norms of accreditation to become degree granting autonomous colleges. Or if they don't want to become degree granting, they become only autonomous colleges within a group of institutions. Now, to do this, you need to have a strategic plan of action. So get back to your own institutions and visit the websites of your colleges and universities. And you will all find there is a vision statement, a mission statement, and a set of goals. And these seem to be frozen in point of time. Nobody has even bothered to see what it is all about. I don't know if I were to ask any one of you, what is the vision statement of your college or your university, none of you may even have seen it for that matter. But this is very critical to the living existence of that institution. So the vision, mission, and goals need to be revisited in the light of what the national education policy is talking about, where we are looking at skills, we are looking at entrepreneurship, we are looking at equity, we are looking at higher order thinking skills, we are looking at language, and so many other aspects. So the IDP is a document which will help institutions to, and this IDP is not prepared by somebody else. It is not a bureaucrat or it is not an outsourced agency. It is each one of us. We will prepare first for our department. That departments will flow into the institution, and then that institution's IDP, faculty representatives, student representatives, the senior management representatives, a body like a task force is identified with no external people, except you can have advisors who are retired academicians and so on. I am doing IDP for a number of institutions, but my role over there is to guide and advise them. So an IDP is made where every institution will look at its vision, mission, and goals and objectives, set for itself its own targets. Do I want to become a research intensive university like Aligarh Muslim University? It is already having so many departments. It may like to become a multidisciplinary education and research university, which we said are MERUs. So for that, you will do a SWOT analysis. What is your strength, weakness, opportunity, threats, or challenges? And then you will identify the goals from the angle of those 5 goals of access, equity, quality, accountability, and affordability. Set targets with timelines and with budgets. And this IDP is not a document that you make it one time and throw it into the shelf of your office records and not look at it. It is a living document, and you look at it for a strategic plan of action for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years. And the UGC has facilitated the methodology of doing it by bringing out guidelines, which are, of course, always in terms of guidelines. You can always innovate and tweak it to suit your own context and your own requirements. But this will help you to address whether there are departments you want to start, whether you want to ensure that all faculty are there, students are coming from different social groups, all these aspects. What is the lack that is there? Are we not participating in ranking? Are we not doing accreditation? If so, what are our targets that we need to have? All aspects of quality, access, equity, affordability, accountability, and collaboration, which is a part of it. So you lay down larger goals. Within that, you lay down the sub goals. But an IDP helps an institution to have a clear-cut map and path going forward, where each one of us, as part of that institution, would like to see our college or our university going forward. It also develops a sense of belonging to each one of us in the, let us say, the organic life of an institution, in the corporate life of that institution, because we are also a part of that process of making. Now, coming to the last segment, and that relates to the regulation. So the internal governance is something that is internally managed by an institution. The regulation in our country is managed by 17 professional councils. Higher education sector has 17 regulatory councils. We are largely familiar with UGC because it deals with the general education. And you have AICT for technical education, you have NCTE for teacher education, you have the Agriculture Council for agriculture, Pharmacy Council that is there, the Dental Council that is there, Nursing Council, the National Medical Commission, Bar Council of India, the Council of Architecture. There are 17 such bodies which are regulating the system. And these regulatory bodies are combining within them 4 functions. One is to regulate institutions under it. When you say regulate, are they following the standard norms and procedures? Are they doing something that they should not be doing, and therefore they should be penalized, or punitive action should be taken? So that is regulating. It's like a policeman's kind of a job where you're regulating the system. So if you have insurance regulatory authority, whether insurance policies take care, insurance companies take care of it in that same sense. Telecom regulatory has come because it wants to ensure that the providers do not overcharge and so on. The same way regulation takes care of all those aspects of higher education in the admission process, in the way the process of governance is happening, in the terms of norms and requirements that are being followed and standards that are being followed for the administration of that institution. So that is regulation. The second function is funding. It is the funding source. Then comes accreditation, and then comes academic standard setting. Now, when in 1956, when the UGC was brought out as an act of the parliament, we had 50 universities. And today I told you the size of higher education. And combining these 4 functions in the same body has greatly hampered higher education. So what we recommended in the policy is a principle of separating the 4 functions of regulation, funding, accreditation, and standard setting. 2 reasons. 1, by combining it, there is an over concentration of power. 2, these functions are sometimes at contradiction to one another. And therefore, you need to really look at it separately. As many of you will understand, that you do not combine the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary in one and the same body. That is the separation of powers. So we wrote about light but tight regulation by separating the functions of funding, regulation, accreditation, and standard setting. And that separation of powers calls for a reconfiguration of the regulatory bodies. And therefore, we said all the existing 17 regulatory bodies will concede their regulatory powers to a new body that we are talking about, which is the National Higher Education Regulatory Council. Now, in this, 2 bodies, the Bar Council and the National Medical Commission, because their acts were brought out very recently prior to the 2020 policy, they said initially they will not join, but now at this stage, they may be quite easily able to join and concede their regulatory powers. Now, when I say that, please don't think that therefore we cannot offer medical courses or law courses. They are agreed to offering the multidisciplinary courses, but it's only for the regulation that they had certain hiccups, which in already 4 years having lapsed, anytime that bill is brought, it is possible that they may be a part of it. So NHERC is the body which will take care of regulation. National Accreditation Council, which will subsume within itself the existing National Assessment and Accreditation Council, NAC, the National Board of Accreditation, which does it for technical subjects. So NAC and NBA will become a part of the new body, that is National Accreditation Council, which is like a super accreditor, and which will also have multiple accrediting agencies, which will be given the functions of taking up accreditation. I hope you are already aware that accreditation itself is up for a lot of reform, We are moving away from graded accreditation to binary accreditation as a part of the NEP accreditation recommendations. And that is now being rolled out so that all higher education institutions, all the 47,000 colleges, 13,000 standalone institutions, and 1,200 universities go for accreditation rather than run away from accreditation, being scared of the fact that I won't get A double plus and so on. That we want firstly that you are an accredited institution. So the National Accreditation Council will be the new body that will take care of accreditation, subsuming NAAC and subsuming NBA. And for funding, since UGC, AICT, NCT, and all these become null and void once the bill gets passed, the funding will be taken care through a body called the Higher Education Grants Council, that is the HEGC. And since UGC also will become null and void for academic standard setting, we said all these 17 councils, they will become professional standard setting bodies. Like NCT will be standard setting body for teacher education, AICT will be a standard setting body for technical education, Dental Council will be a standard setting body. In that same way, since UGC will not be there, we will have a general education council which will take up standard setting for all the courses like BA, BCom, BSc, BBA, and so on, which we are handling and which currently the UGC is handling. So you have NHERC, you have NAC, you have HEGC, and you have GEC along with PSSBs handling the separate functions of regulation, accreditation, funding, and standard setting. Now, to take care of these four verticals, we have talked about an umbrella architecture because the fundamental question came that if there are fights that happen between these bodies, the system of higher education will suffer, and therefore an umbrella architecture called the Higher Education Commission of India. Now, this is to come about through a bill in the parliament. In two finance budgets, the minister has said that, but the bill has not yet been tabled. And the main reason is because the education is a subject in the concurrent list, and consensus building with the states so that they don't feel apprehensive that they may not get grants, they may have to be subjugated to a lot of extra regulation. This has to come about through a lot of conversation and dialogue and consensus building with the state governments, and that work is still in progress. But moment that reform happens, then the HECI becomes the new umbrella architecture with the four independent verticals to implement what the NEP talked about of a light but tight regulation. So to sum up, I have tried to enlighten you from the perspective of governance and management, the aspects that we must understand in terms of the challenges that Indian higher education system faces, how we have tried to address it through multiple ways. But for the focus of our discussions, we focused on leadership development, internal governance, and regulation. And for that, the various instrumentalities that are there in place and the changes that are likely to take place is what I have said to you. You can have a look at the UGC guidelines, which look at institutional development plan, which also look at aspects relating to the governance part of it in terms of teacher recruitment guidelines and the new guidelines that are coming out for holistic and about nearly 15 to 20 guidelines have been brought out to implement various aspects. But as far as governance and management is concerned, it relates mainly to IDP and transforming institutions into higher education institutions. These are the guidelines that you may like to have a look at. So let me stop over here, and we have some about 12 minutes in hand, and I would like to really hear from you on any queries that you have on this theme, or leave aside beyond this theme also going into any other aspect of NEP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for nice and informative lecture. I have just a query. as
Yes.
these regulating bodies made policies and other things for universities, is it possible to apply all these rule regulations in all universities in same manner?
No. So when you say the regulatory changes, now let us assume, for example, your agriculture council
Yes,
lays
ma'am.
down certain norms, which moment the new framework comes, they are not the body that will bring out the norms, because then NHERC takes over. But NHERC will not do something without taking into consideration what has currently been in practice. So the application, when they lay down, let us say, an agriculture university, what it should have, and an agriculture college, what it should have, they will try to follow as far as possible the multiple models which currently are there in place. There is no one size fits all model for any aspect in our country. It is not possible, because each state is in a different context, and each discipline of study is also in a different context. So that is why the rollout moment you have the act becoming a reality for regulation, then once that act comes, then those rules and regulations are formulated. That transition time, all colleges and universities will see the applicability of that, but it will never be, let us say, a very common. There may be guidelines which are common, but each one will apply that in their own institution by making necessary changes within their own internal statutes and acts
Yes.
accordingly, and then follow that. So we need not be worried, because that is a process which will take some time, but it will require institutions also to modify their internal acts and statutes on the basis of those major changes that will happen.
Okay. And if regarding to this new this National Education Policy 2020, if we will talk about the courses and the distribution of the credits, that means that will be followed in all university in same manner. But the
Yeah, so
course,
that is already there, isn't it? The UGC has already brought out guidelines,
yes, ma'am.
and accordingly, other disciplines other than BA, BCom, BSc, the law courses, the agriculture courses, the architecture courses, the pharmacy courses, each council is bringing out its own regulations at the moment in terms of the credit distribution. We have said for largely our courses, it is 40 credits per year, totaling to 120 credits for 3 years, or for 4 years. Since
60.
yours is already a 4-year program, it is minimum 160 credits. Now, within that, if you feel that your discipline should have for 4 years 200 credits, it is up to your institution, in the sense, not your institution, agriculture regulations,
Yes, ma'am.
agriculture education regulations, to decide on that. And that combination will vary. Some states have 133 credits for 3 years, 177 credits for 4 years. So the general principle is that the courses are multidisciplinary. It
Yes, ma'am.
is modular with an exit option. It
Hmm.
is giving you the flexibility to do it from more than one institution and through multiple modes, including distance education. And all these are plotted onto the academic bank of credit.
Hmm.
And the NHEQF will establish equivalence across institutions, and the National Credit Framework will establish equivalence across modes, right from secondary stage to higher education. So the broad principle remains the same. How this is articulated by states, universities is different. How it is articulated through different disciplinary councils are different, but they will all align themselves to the fundamentals of NEP requirements.
Suppose we consider that the student has applied for BSc,
Mhm,
and he has done first year from some particular college, and
mhm,
now he wants to join another university in second year.
mhm.
So the course credit will be added,
Yes.
but the course whatever he has done in the first year, that will be maybe the same in the university in second year. It
No,
may be
no, no.
possibility.
No, no, no. See, what we are trying to say is that largely when the guidelines for formulation of courses are done, let us say you have a very advanced course in physics, it is normally not taught in the first year. And that is where the NHEQF, when
Yes.
all universities become a part of following the NHEQF, follow the fundamental requirements of the difficulty level of the courses to be taught up to the tune of 80%. So there will always be a similarity up to the tune of 80%.
Okay.
The variation only happens in the 20%. And that variation, we believe an adult student of 18 plus should be able to cope up with when joining in a new institution.
Okay. And ma'am, one another thing, this program is now applicable only for UG. But
At the moment, we have given out the draft guidelines for PG.
yes,
As per that, that is also modular, and that is for the 2-year PG. There will be two types of PG. One
yes,
is also 1 year, and
and
it can also be an integrated one, which is of 5 years with the BSc and MSc together. So that combinations, the 1-year PG new guidelines have yet to be formulated. But currently, what is being done is that is also modular with an exit option, and that student is also having the option that suppose that was a minor, in that also the student can take up a PG qualification.
okay. So when we are going for the PG 1-year program, so we have to modify the 4-year courses according to that. That means if a student exit in 3rd year, then he has to go for 2-year MSc.
Yes.
And when he is leaving after 4 years, then he has to go for 1 year.
1 year, yes.
So we have to define the course. That means we have to define the course UG and PG together.
Yes.
Otherwise, if we have given 4-year
There
courses,
are 3 or 4 options: 3 years with 2 years PG,
yes,
and then going for the PhD, or it is 4 years which is with honors and going for 1 year's masters,
yes,
or it is 4 years with research and directly joining the PhD. All these 3 pathways are now going to be open, and those who have done bachelor's with research, even those who did research in which there was a minor topic that they've taken, we are allowing them to take up that also under the PhD. That is the flexibility we are bringing in. Now, currently, the 4-year, we already have a curricula in place. The
Yes,
2-year PG, also the curricula is there in place. Institutions like ISER and agriculture and architecture and all already had integrated programs. So when they have integrated programs, they have to realign their curricula in the light of these new requirements of becoming multidisciplinary.
And in our university, in MSc, the thesis work is there in
Yeah.
place of dissertation. If
Uh-huh.
the student has done dissertation in 4-year BSc, then it is not compulsory for him in 1-year MSc.
No, we have not said that. Project work is a compulsory part in both the degree and the PG level. So even for an integrated 5-year program or a 4-year bachelor's with MSc, the student may have to do, but you may not necessarily call it a thesis. It may be sometimes confined to be called a project because the student has come in through a honors with research at the 4-year level. But that will have to be seen, because what your Agriculture Council currently is saying needs to be seen, because at the moment what we are talking about is only the 2-year PG. We have not yet brought out the guidelines for the 1-year masters so far. We haven't yet brought that out. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Thank
Any
you.
other participant? Yeah, thank you, Deepika. Any other participant? How many of your institutions are preparing an institutional development plan? Is there anyone over here among the 19 odd participants who can share whether your college or your university is preparing an IDP? Are you all there, or it is only that you're logged in and not present in the session?
है हाँ सुन रहे हैं आपको
हाँ बताइए दानिश.
मैम ऐसा कोई प्लान अभी तो है नहीं
अच्छा, आपके संस्था में नहीं
जी,
किया
जी।
है, तो आप यहाँ पे
अभी
जो
नहीं किया।
अटेंड किया है उसके बेसिस से आप ये बताना चाहिए कि एनईपी में ये लिखा हुआ है और ये
जी,
जरूरी
जी।
है, ताकि हमारे इंस्टीट्यूशन का एक फ्यूचर प्लान ऑफ एक्शन लेके आ सकते हैं. आई से दैट
जी,
टू
जी।
ऑल ऑफ यू ऑल, in most of the cases we are very slow in bringing about these reforms. तो ये बहुत जरूरी होती है कि हमारे सारे कॉलेज हो या यूनिवर्सिटी हो, हम एक प्लान ऑफ एक्शन अगर है हमारे हाथ में, तो हमारा डेवलपमेंट उस तरह से बहुत आसान हो जाती है, क्योंकि हम बहुत सारी चीज की कमियां भी एसेस कर सकते हैं और क्या फ्यूचर में करना है ये भी हमें एक प्लान ऑफ एक्शन मिल जाती है.
जी मैम.
Anyone else? Okay, if there are no questions, I think we can wind up the session. So please go through guidelines that the UGC has brought. Of course, I have taken a session in which only 2 guidelines of the UGC becomes relevant for you, and that is the guidelines for IDP and transforming institutions into multidisciplinary. But it is important for all of you to also look through all the UGC guidelines on the 4-year curricula, on multiple entry and exit, on academic bank of credit, on the National Higher Education Qualification Framework, global citizenship education, internationalization of education, Indian knowledge systems, new teaching and learning pedagogies, the draft notification for the 2-year PG program. Have a look at these guidelines. These will empower you and go beyond your understanding of what you are getting by only attending these sensitization programs. So thank you all very much. Take care and stay blessed. I don't think there is any representative from HRDC of AMU, so I think we can wind up the session. Is there anyone from HRDC AMU? I think Muhammad Shakir had left the meeting. I think he had mentioned something. So anyway, thank you all very much. And I think you can rejoin for your next session whenever it is scheduled. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.